Is your horse busted, ugly, or straight up plain? Do all the other champions of Cyrodiil make fun of your haggard old nag? Sounds like you need horse armor. Horse armor will transform your stale stallion into a pretty pony. And the villagers will love it too. All for the low cost of $2.50 and all the goodwill your company has built up. Horse armor is one of the weirdest phrases thrown around video game communities. This little DLC for the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion is often credited with the rise of exploitative microtransactions. But is that a fair assessment? Or are we putting the shopping cart before the horse? Welcome to Game Arcadia, the peak of gaming culture. I'm Jenna Stieber, and I'm unearthing the weirdest behaviors in video game cultures. Why me? Well, I have a master's degree in media and culture and a certification in horse girl, which makes me the Oracle. It's November 22nd, 2005, and an innovation just dropped that would forever change video games.
So if you own an Xbox 360, one of the features of the system that you've definitely been using is Xbox Live.
Gaming was undergoing a transition between being a physical hobby to a digital hobby, and the marketplace was a big part of that. Games were still overwhelmingly sold on discs, because the internet moved about as quickly as a mammoth sinking into a tar pit. There weren't day one patches or a DLC. The disc had the whole, complete game on it, ready to go. That went for additional content too. If a game was popular enough, it got an expansion pack, which was also sold on a disc, in a box, on a shelf, in a store. To justify all that, expansions had to be fairly expensive and pack in a lot of new content. Bethesda Game Studios had released two big expansions for the Elder Scrolls III Morrowind in this way, Tribunal and Blood Moon. But the gaming industry was starting to move towards digital delivery of content, enabling gamers to DLC. Bethesda had already been doing this for Morrowind. They offered small content drops on their websites, like an upgraded soundscape for the Bitter Coast, and numerous armor packs. These DLC were all free. This worked because Morrowind was a PC exclusive, so gamers could easily download and install these bonus goodies. PC games had communities of modders that offered small upgrades, and some even charged for their work. I had a friend in college who paid a lot of her tuition selling custom fashion for The Sims 2. That was controversial, since it technically violated a lot of EULAs, contracts that we all consider sacred. But these fans were just doing it in their off time, serving community needs on an open market. A lot of studios saw that activity and said, well, we want a piece of that. But Bethesda had a problem. Morrowind's follow-up, Oblivion, was coming out for PC and Xbox 360. Console games couldn't easily be modified or DLC'd. Posting content up on a website wasn't gonna cut it anymore. So how could they get small content out to Xbox users? Through the Xbox Live Marketplace. The marketplace made it easy to install content of any size for any Xbox game. Players would translate their real folding money into Microsoft points and buy small digital items using the points. This cut down on the credit card fees that publishers had to pay with each transaction. Players would buy a lot of points at once, paying one fee, and then dole the points out as smaller purchases. Smaller purchases, or you might say, microtransactions. Microtransactions have a pretty bad reputation these days, but back then their reputation was non-existent. They didn't have a reputation because they weren't widely used, and they certainly weren't used by reputable mainstream games. They only appeared in mobile games, Neopets, MapleStory, the kind of games that real gamers scoffed at. The marketplace changed all that. It supported the microtransaction structure for any game on its system. Studios that otherwise wouldn't have bothered with DLC could now do so easily. There was an unspoken covenant between gamers and studios. When you plonked down $60 to buy a single-player game, you were getting the whole game. Anything beyond that would be free, or a massive expansion well worth the additional cost. Players had no reason to assume respectable studios would start nickel and diming them. The marketplace launched with over 400 pieces of content. A lot of it was free, like demos and trailers, but there were also points purchasable items like themes and icons for your Xbox. There was also one purchasable that actually added in-game content for a single-player title. For 200 marketplace points, or $2.50, fans could unlock a cosmetic pack for that beloved game, Cameo: Elements of Power. You remember Cameo? The Winter Warrior pack featured fun seasonal duds for Cameo and the crew. Players said it was a ripoff, too expensive, too little impact, and an opportunistic cash grab by developers. Cameo didn't have the huge fan base that Elder Scrolls had, so this was little more than a blip in history. Bethesda had already been strategizing about how to use the marketplace to increase revenue before they released Oblivion. Pete Hines, the vice president of marketing for Bethesda, said they planned to add small but fun things that would have significance and value to the player. They'd be coming out on a regular basis for minimal cost. You can tell he works in marketing because that promises a lot but commits to absolutely nothing. But he does explicitly call out one piece of post-release content: horse armor. Oblivion was intended to be an Xbox 360 launch title and was pre-sold as such, but ended up being delayed. This is likely because co-publisher Take-Two Interactive was still struggling with the after effects of the hot coffee controversy. What an exciting time in game history. It would end up releasing on March 20th, 2006 to rave reviews and swimming pools full of cash for Bethesda. Hines had initially promised day one bonus content, but it wouldn't get its first DLC until early April. And that DLC was Horse Armor. On the marketplace, the Horse Armor DLC sold for 200 Microsoft points, or $2.50. On PC, it sold for $1.99, and it's unclear why it was cheaper. The pack had 8 styles of elven and steel armor, and it was perfect if you wanted your horse to look like it slipped in a pile of banana peels. Horses in Oblivion are a little fragile. They take damage from falling, enemies, wild animals, you. They can be poisoned and get diseases and die. But horse vulnerability wasn't really an issue that needed to be solved. If your horse was hurt, you could heal it, or simply buy a new one when it dropped dead if you were a cold-hearted monster. If you were a bad pet owner but desired the majesty of an equine throne, you could use the fastest horse in the game, Shadowmere. She was marked as an essential character in the game's code, so she couldn't die, only fall unconscious. If left to recover on her own, she was scripted to slowly wander back to Fort Farragut for a rendezvous. Slapping some horse armor on your pony didn't actually decrease the damage it took, it just increased their health. So technically, the armor helped your horse fight poison and disease too. What a bargain! As for the fashion side of armor, it is up to you to decide if you think this is an improvement. In the code of Oblivion, equipping the armor actually replaces the horse with a new identical horse that is wearing the armor, sort of like the Prestige, but with horses. And this caused a huge issue, because the DLC armored version of Shadowmere didn't have the code that sent her back to Fort Farragut. So if she was left to recover on her own, she would simply wander off into the famously massive open world of Cyrodiil, never to be found again. It's like if in the Prestige, the magician forgot his home address every time he was duplicated. The Horse Armor DLC didn't include a quest, just a new location and an NPC. But that didn't mean you just got all the horse armor. The first set was free, but you still had to pay 500 gold for each additional armor set. Bethesda was robbing you coming and going. Horse armor was an experiment. The rules about expansion packs, how much they cost, how much content they had to have, were thrown out. Now developers were asking themselves, how small can DLC get? And how far will a gamer's wallet stretch before it snaps? This is a tricky balance. The DLC content can't be too relevant to the base game. Asura's Wrath ran into that issue when it charged players extra to experience the true ending. But DLC can't be so inconsequential that it seems like a vapid cash grab, which a lot of cosmetic packs do. For a multiplayer game, cosmetics might have meaning and status in the community. For a single-player game, they can come off as just petty. And the consensus for Horse Armor was, this is horse shit. Similar content for Morrowind had been free, so a lot of players thought this would be or should be as well. And other studios had given away massive packs of content for their games, like Team Ninja did with the Hurricane packs in Ninja Gaiden. Why couldn't Bethesda do that? Even fans that were interested said it wasn't a very micro charge, especially since there was no quest or gameplay attached. Some actually thought the Horse Armor pack was an unofficial user-created mod just because it was a cosmetic that cost money. That's how unusual it was at the time for a studio to charge for this kind of thing. Some players assumed users would be able to submit their own items to the marketplace. They failed to realize that this was a corporate co-opting of fan behavior, which means fans didn't get to participate anymore. But there is a huge difference between modders charging for cosmetic content and a company charging for it. Modders didn't have the power to decide what was and wasn't in the base game. Selling a cute halter top for my horse didn't mean the base game was lacking one cute horse halter top, it meant the world was one cute horse halter top richer. Bethesda had the power to put whatever content they wanted in Oblivion. It wasn't clear how they decided what would be a part of the base game and what would be held back for an upcharge. If something as basic as horse armor was cut and sold at a premium, what next? Paying for a saddle? For horseshoes? For the horse itself? Buying an empty game world that you had to personally populate with DLC? Players worried that studios would begin parceling out content that should be in the base game for an upcharge, and they were right to be concerned. There's evidence that horse armor was meant to be sold in the base game by Tertia Fiducia in her shop, The March Rider. Most NPCs praise her knowledge of armor, but one specifically references her knowledge of horse armor. According to the unofficial Elder Scrolls wiki, that dialogue was tagged to be re-recorded, probably to cut the mention of horse armor. Also, she's clearly a horse girl, okay? Trust me, we recognize our own. So Bethesda cut this grandma's candy bowl armor and then sold it on the side. It's basically a pink tax on horse girls. On the other hand, a lot of players defended Bethesda. Because it was the early 2000s, both the idea of voting with your dollars and the phrase wambulance were popular and equally annoying.
Somebody call the wambulance.
What did you say?
Defenders said, it's a free market. If you don't like it, don't buy it. You can lead a horse to water, but they don't have to drink it. But that line of thinking is pretty naive. Even though gamers hated this and there was a lot of pushback, once studios saw that this was a monetization option, they were off to the races. Microtransactions had a death grip on gaming's throat for the decade that followed, fundamentally altering how games were made and sold. A few gamers even looked at this mess and foresaw a future in which games would ship unfinished, relying on downloadable updates and drip-fed content to round out the experience over time. They should have been the oracle, because that's exactly the gaming landscape we live in today. Horse armor might have been the initial blow against a single price tag for games, but other studios took up the hammer and destroyed the concept over time. I still hear developers throw around horse armor to describe the way studios prioritize monetization over content. Sure, games are art, but also games are business. The point system in the marketplace was meant to enable smaller, cheaper content. In that way, it was successful. But it also meant that it was way harder to tell how much money you were spending. Horse armor didn't cost a whole $2.50, it only cost 200 Microsoft points. Unless you were doing the exchange rate in your head, it was easy to think you were spending less than you really were, and a few purchases here and there quickly added up. My friends and I were devoted Rock Band players in the post-college poverty of our 20s. On occasion, they'd treat the group to a new song. One day, they checked how much they had spent on songs that year and found it was over $200. That was money that could have been used to get their tires replaced, pay off credit card debt, or most likely stock up on malt liquor. And they got off easy. Enabled by the marketplace, Rock Band released 2,784 DLC songs at either $1 or $1.99 a pop. If you bought them all, you paid anywhere between $2,784 and $5,540.16. That's not a microtransaction, that's a death by 5,540 cuts. Of course, that is also an unusual use case scenario. Rock Band fans weren't buying every old song that used to play, just the ones that made them begin dreaming. Till they saw Mary Ann walk away. Paying $2.50 for horse armor seems a bit quaint now. I mean, you only paid $2.50, and you definitely got horse armor. These days, you'd have to buy 20 loot boxes and hope that this broken highlighter armor was in one of them, or pay for the ability to potentially unlock horse armor after 60 hours of grinding. Despite the backlash, Bethesda didn't back down from the horse armor. They didn't discount it, they didn't add more content, and they generally didn't acknowledge the fan reaction. But in a rare win for gamer tantrums, I do think they took the feedback to heart. Hines had said they were intending to do regular small drops of content for Oblivion, but that didn't really happen. The only DLC as sparse as horse armor was the Spelltomes DLC, which introduced new spells and the ability to learn them from books. It was only 80 points or 99 cents. The rest of the DLC were more robust. Orrery included an actual quest, while Thieves' Den, Vile Lair, and the Wizard's Tower granted a new player home with thematic items and skill buffs. And they were all cheaper than horse armor, costing just 150 points or $1.89. Bethesda's next game, Fallout 3, had hefty, expansion-style DLCs and no piddling dog armor, although God knows dog meat could have used it. Skyrim and Fallout 4 followed suit, leaving the smaller offerings to modders. Of course, once other games had established the skins economy and Battle Pass monetization, Bethesda dove back in. The Atomic Shop in Fallout 76 offers a myriad of emotes and upgrades, all for a small points-based fee. Say what you will about horse armor. That the gold is already oxidizing, that it looked like they made tinfoil cosplay the night before the con. Thank God the horse's face is hidden or they'd be so embarrassed. What was I saying? Oh yeah, say what you will about horse armor, but people did buy it. The same 2009 blog post insists that it still sells daily. Feels like a pretty defensive thing to say, but I guess you don't need thick skin when you've got armor.